Great to be here with you guys today. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There's no CBA deal. The players don't want to agree to what the owners are proposing. Perfect. Grab Asia Wilson, grab Sabrina, grab Sophie, grab the superstar, the main attraction, Caitlin Clark, and let's start this league.
That's not hyperbole. That's not a hot take meant to chase clicks. It's a serious proposal being floated right now, as the WNBA and its Players Association remain deadlocked with no collective bargaining agreement in place. The league has just announced a moratorium on all business operations. Free agency is frozen. Contract negotiations are on hold. And the divide between ownership and players has grown so bitter that some are now suggesting the unthinkable: blow it all up and start over.
Wouldn't notice the difference. Nobody would say to themselves, oh wow, the talent has really dropped off this year. Nobody's going to be saying that. In fact, they'll be saying, wow, it's real calm this season. There's not so much complaining and whining going on this season. Start fresh with players that deserve money and with players that can push the...
Here's what makes this moment so critical. The previous CBA expired on Friday. The two sides couldn't agree on an extension. They're now in what's called status quo, where the old working conditions technically remain in place, but nobody can actually conduct business. Teams were prepared to extend qualifying offers to free agents under the expired agreement, but players refused to sign anything while a new salary structure with massive pay increases is still being negotiated. 84 of the league's 86 veterans are currently free agents, all waiting for a new CBA before they'll put pen to paper. The sticking point is revenue sharing. Owners offered to increase the player share from 9% to 15%. The players want 30% of revenue before expenses are deducted. That gap represents hundreds of millions of dollars over the life of the deal.
Know what you guys think in the comments section below. Like the video and subscribe. These players are so committed to the downfall of their own league. They've tried forever to get noticed by the mainstream. In comes Caitlin Clark. Finally, they get noticed. They've tried so long to get paid what they think that they're owed. In comes Caitlin Clark. Owners actually see someone that can make them dollar signs and they say, you know what?
Now, let's talk about what actually changed to create this leverage. For 27 years, the WNBA operated at a loss. Attendance was modest. Television ratings barely registered. Corporate sponsorships were minimal. The league survived because NBA owners subsidized it as a goodwill gesture and a long-term investment in growing the game. Then Caitlin Clark arrived in April 2024. The Indiana Fever went from averaging about 4,600 fans per home game in 2023 to selling out every single game, and their road games became de facto sellouts wherever they played. Television viewership exploded. The Fever's game against the Las Vegas Aces on July 2nd drew 2.3 million viewers on ESPN, the most-watched WNBA game in 23 years. Corporate sponsors who had never touched women's basketball suddenly wanted in. Nike, State Farm, Gatorade, and Wilson all signed major deals.
Players believe that they're entitled to more money. The old guard fans have brainwashed them into thinking that they are entitled in.
And this is where the tension really begins. Owners looked at those numbers and saw something they'd never seen before: actual profitability. Not next year, not 5 years from now, but right now. So they came to the negotiating table willing to compromise in ways they never had before. Maximum contracts jumping to over $1 million. Average salaries exceeding $500,000. Minimum salaries at $250,000. Charter flights for all teams. Better hotels. Enhanced benefits by any historical standard. That's a massive leap. The average WNBA salary in 2023 was approximately $113,000. The owner's proposal would more than quadruple that figure.
And Women's National Basketball Players Association have reached an agreement on a moratorium for league business, sources told ESPN on Monday. The moratorium is necessary because the sides failed to reach an agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement or an extension of the previous one by Friday's deadline. The sides continue to negotiate on a new CBA amid what's become a bitter impasse as they work toward what both sides acknowledge will be a transformative deal. They remain far apart on several key issues, including chiefly what a revenue sharing system should look like. Now, is it really bitter on the owner side? Probably not. They think they're going above and beyond with some of the things that they're willing to give them.
But here's what the Players Association is arguing. They're saying those revenue projections are based almost entirely on Caitlin Clark's drawing power. And if one player is responsible for generating that much value, then the entire player pool deserves a larger share because the league is marketing them as a collective product. They point to the NBA, where players receive 50% of basketball-related income. They point to the NWSL, where soccer players negotiated up to 50%. They're asking why basketball players should accept 15% when every other major professional league gives athletes at least 40%. The owners counter that the WNBA still has massive overhead costs, expansion fees, new arenas, infrastructure investments. They argue that taking 30% of revenue before expenses would bankrupt half the teams in the league, especially the smaller market franchises that don't have Caitlin Clark.
Players are bitter because they think that they're owed something that they haven't earned. The players are bitter. The players have things to lose. Well, not all of the players, but the players in the negotiating rooms, Breanna Stewart and Nafisa Collier. They would love it if WNBA folds. Unrivaled gets some players. Maybe that league turns to 5-on-5. They already see a future for Unrivaled. Breanna Stewart earlier this weekend said, oh man, after it's so hard to compartmentalize. I mean, after the games, then I gotta go and take emails and phone calls and take places on this and take places on that. Wouldn't it just be easier if that league didn't exist anymore? That's what she's saying to herself.
And that bitterness he's referring to, it's not just about money. It's personal now. Players Association President Nanika Aguam and Vice President Breanna Stewart have been vocal on social media about feeling disrespected by the owner's offer. They've framed it as a continuation of the league's history of undervaluing its athletes. Several veteran players have given interviews suggesting the owners are trying to exploit Caitlin Clark's popularity without properly compensating the players who built the foundation she's standing on. Meanwhile, ownership sources have leaked to reporters that they feel the players are negotiating in bad faith, that the association is making demands they know can't be met, possibly because some of the leadership has financial interests in rival leagues. Breanna Stewart co-founded Unrivaled, the new 3-on-3 league that's paying top players significantly more for a shorter season. Some owners privately wonder if Stewart actually wants the WNBA to fold, so Unrivaled becomes the premier women's basketball product.
Massive increases in compensation is still being bargained. All but 2 of the league's veterans and free agents this offseason in anticipation of a new CBA. The moratorium will halt those initial stages of free agency in which teams would seek to deliver qualifying offers and core designations to players. Just start fresh. Just start fresh. Call up Caitlin Clark and say, hey, Cece, we're moving on. You wanna play in the WNBA? You could be our first player. Call Sophie. Hey, Sophie, you want to come play in the WNBA? You'll be our first player. What are the steps to just tear that up and start new? Seriously, fans won't care. Let me rephrase. The fans that actually move the needle won't care.
That moratorium he's describing is significant. Under normal circumstances, free agency would have opened on January 21st. Teams would be making offers. Players would be signing contracts. Instead, everything is frozen. The Chicago Sky can't negotiate with free agents. The Los Angeles Sparks can't extend qualifying offers. Players who are planning to switch teams are stuck in limbo. And here's what makes the timing so problematic. Training camps are supposed to start in early May, and the season is scheduled to tip off that same month. If there's no CBA agreement by mid-March, teams won't have adequate time to build rosters. If negotiations drag into April, the entire season could be in jeopardy. The league and the Players Association did agree to extend the moratorium, which at least keeps everyone at the table. But sources on both sides describe the negotiations as tense and unproductive. The gap between the two positions hasn't narrowed in weeks.
At this point, many of those folks are saying, just lock them out. End this nonsense. Shut this league down. We are officially at the point where this bargaining and negotiating, it's turned into a pileup on the side of the road that people are now paying attention to. They don't really have an invested interest in it. They're just paying attention to because it's a pileup on the side of the road. This league is it's losing steam. It's losing steam by the day. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark got here, dude, they're here. They might even be off the screen now. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark arrived, they've fallen off so fast. People don't even want to watch anything that doesn't have to do with Caitlin Clark. No one cares about Unrivaled. No one cared about the playoffs. No one cared about the finals. Oh, but the ratings. Yeah, but the ratings were inflated. Nobody paid attention. You look at Caitlin Clark games, you look at Indiana Fever games, and you look at non-Caitlin Clark games. There it is. Said it. Right there. This league has lost momentum, and it's all because of the players. Unwillingness to negotiate. Unwillingness to compromise. The owners have done their part. And as far as I'm concerned, move on without the old guard. Hire whatever attorney you can to make that possible and just do it. If not, shut it down.
So, let's examine this nuclear option seriously, because it's not as crazy as it sounds. On first hearing, the legal framework for using replacement players exists. When negotiations break down in professional sports, management can declare an impasse and implement their last best offer. Players can strike. Owners can lock them out. And if the union refuses to accept the terms, ownership can hire replacement workers to continue operations. It happened in the NFL in 1997. The players went on strike. The owners brought in replacements. They played 3 weeks of games with substitute players before the union caved and accepted management's offer. It happened in Major League Baseball in 1995 when owners used replacement players during spring training until a court injunction stopped them. Could it work in the WNBA? Theoretically, yes. The league could offer Caitlin Clark, Sabrina Ionesco, Paige Beckers, and a handful of other marquee names significantly above market contracts, then fill out the rosters with replacement players, overseas professionals, former college stars who didn't make WNBA rosters, players from other leagues willing to cross the picket line. Would fans notice the difference in talent? Absolutely. The quality of play would drop significantly. But here's the calculation ownership would be making. Do casual fans, who only started watching because of Caitlin Clark, care about the difference between a veteran WNBA rotation player and a replacement-level athlete? Or do they just want to watch Caitlin Clark play basketball? The television ratings suggest they might not care as much as you'd think. When the Fever played without injured stars, their viewership still dwarfed every other game on the schedule. When Caitlin Clark sat out the fourth quarter of blowouts, viewers turned off the broadcast. The data indicates a significant portion of the new audience is there for specific players, not for the league as a whole. Now, would this strategy actually work long-term? Almost certainly not. It would be a public relations disaster. The Players Association would file unfair labor practice charges. Sponsors might pull out rather than be associated with a labor dispute. Fans who care about women's basketball as a sport, rather than just as entertainment, would revolt. But in the short term, as a negotiating tactic, it carries real leverage, because the threat alone might be enough to bring the Players Association back to the table with a more realistic proposal. If ownership can credibly argue that they're willing to operate with replacement players rather than accept 30% revenue sharing, that changes the entire dynamic of the negotiation. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. The leverage in this negotiation isn't evenly distributed. The Players Association is acting like they have equal bargaining power, but they don't. 5 players are responsible for probably 75% of the league's current revenue growth. The other 95 players have far less individual leverage. If you're Caitlin Clark, you could walk away from the WNBA tomorrow and sign a deal with Unrivaled or a European league for more money. If you're Brianna Stewart, same thing. But if you're a role player making the league minimum, you need the WNBA more than it needs you. That's the brutal economic reality. It's also why some observers think the Players Association might have overplayed their hand by demanding 30%. Because if owners call that bluff and implement their 15% offer, what's the union's next move? Lock themselves out of the only major professional women's basketball league in North America? The momentum this league built in 2024 is already fading. Nobody watched the playoffs with the same intensity as the regular season. Unrivaled is getting modest attention, but nothing close to what the WNBA generated during the Fever's run. The longer this negotiation drags on, the more casual fans drift away, and that's what makes this moment so critical. The WNBA has a window right now to capitalize on unprecedented interest. But that window is closing. Every week without a resolution is a week fans forget about the league. Every month without games is a month corporate sponsors start questioning their investment. So, who blinks first? Do the players accept something closer to the owner's offer and lock in generational wealth for the next decade? Or do they hold firm on 30% and risk a work stoppage that could destroy everything they've built? Because here's what everyone needs to understand. This isn't just about money. This is about whether the WNBA can sustain itself as a viable business. And right now, with no CBA, no free agency, and no clear path forward, that question doesn't have a good answer. The league that finally broke through to mainstream America might be about to break itself.